Welcome back to the Car Crowd HQ, where today we're talking about classic car valuations and looking at some of our top performing assets. Classic cars have been a fantastic category of alternative assets over the last 10 years. In fact, the Knight Frank Index's most recent report shows they've been returning 185% for investors. But of course, you needed the capital to be able to store, buy, insure and maintain the whole car. But with us, there is an opportunity to invest fractionally within these great classic cars. In the last year alone, the Knight Frank Index reported that the classic cars have been up 25%. And we wanted to see today how some of our cars stack up against that pretty phenomenal rate of return. So we're going to be taking you through each one of these cars today and finding out how much they've appreciated since they were actually funded. But before we go into the depth of each one of the individual cars, we're just going to talk about what we call director's estimates. Now, it's a bit of a boring bit, so bear with me, but we wanted to give you an understanding of how we go through and value the cars. First of all, we take data from our partner Classic GT. They hold data from Australian, US and UK and European auctions. They're all pumped into a database that becomes searchable by make and model. We also use Haggerty and Glenmarch just to cross-check and make sure the valuation that we've got for the make and model is about right and there's no massive anomalies. Once we've got that benchmark or baseline valuation, we then look at the different condition of our car, so provenance, history, mileage, all of those things are taken into consideration so that we can tweak the valuation up or down depending on whether our car or the funded asset is better or worse than that baseline asset there. We then take that hypothetical valuation for the asset and we compare it to real cars out in the market right now, real for sale cars, and also some that have recently sold. That just gives us that cross check to make sure that we're valuing it against real world assets and also to make sure that we're not over promising or over inflating the valuation. The last thing we want to do is to provide a higher valuation than we think is achievable, because that would just disappoint investors, and that's not what we're about. So all that said, that's how we create the director's estimate. And if you ever see any estimations of valuations on our platform, that is the science that goes behind how we come to those figures. Taking all that into consideration, the 6 assets you see here, plus the other 7 that are in the unit behind me, means that our current portfolio's average rate of return is actually 20%, with our top performing asset hitting 38%. And we're going to go into a bit more detail about each one of these cars to see how they're performing next. So first up, we've got the hero of the collection, the McGann R26R. This car was produced to celebrate the Formula One successes after the R26 wasn't quite strong enough for those Renault Sport enthusiasts. Renault went back, sharpened their pencil and produced the R26R, complete with carbon fibre bonnet, plexi front wings and also plexiglass rear quarters and rear windscreen. This thing was lighter than the R26 and lapped the Nürburgring even faster, in fact setting the record for the front wheel drive cars around the Nürburgring. It was dubbed the blue collar workers GT3 Porsche at the time, but didn't really sell in that fantastic quantities. In fact, just 159 of the 230 UK allocation were sold, meaning that it really is a very rare car back then and still is a very rare car right now. We funded this asset last year at £29,000 and now latest valuation in the market, the director's estimate we talked about earlier, sees it around £40,000. In fact, some examples on the market now are nearly touching 50k already. That sees an estimated rate of return for investors in this car at 38%. Now we come to the first car we ever funded on the Car Crowd platform, the wonderful little Peugeot 205 GTI. This car's one of the most iconic hot hatches out there, and I know loads of people will be screaming it's not a 1.9, it's a 1.6, but interestingly the 1.6 was actually originally designed to be in this car. That was the engine that Peugeot wanted to have it with, and it was only because Volkswagen had the GTI Golf that came out that had a slightly faster 0 to 60 time that they actually beefed up the engine and made it into a 1.9 GTI. But actually the chassis chassis and the driving experience is all really set up for the 1.6, so purists like myself kind of believe more that the 1.6 is the one to have as the real driver's car. This is a 24,000 mile example with one lady owner from Coleraine Cars in Northern Ireland, and it's still got all the original dealer plates and stickers. It's completely original, completely unrestored, and in the most beautiful condition. In fact, it's probably find another one. I don't think there's another one out there across the whole of Europe. We funded the little GTI over 2 years ago now at £18,900, and because it's so rare, it's very difficult to find exact like-for-like comparisons in the marketplace, with some cars selling over in France last year for nearly 70,000 plus euros. We valued this car fairly conservatively at £22,700 currently, which gives a 20% annualised rate of return for investors. It's one that's very close to my heart, being the first car that we ever funded on the platform, and I'm so pleased to see that it's delivering great returns for the investors. And now we come on to the little Mini Cooper S, but not just any Mini Cooper S. The R53, so the Mark 1 of the Mini Cooper S is made by BMW, but most importantly, 3 letters, JCW, the John Cooper Works Special Edition. Up-rated supercharger, smaller pulley, delivering more power, making this the Cooper S variant to really have. Also making it one of the rarest variants, simply because of the fact that these were all certificated and they were dealer optional extras. So a lot of people have lost those certificates, and a lot of them have been copied over the years, but this is an original JCW upgraded one with the certificate, with full history, around 36,000 miles. So again, low mileage because these cars were used as daily drivers a lot of the time. So this is a very rare find to have in such amazing condition. And the reason these cars are so good is the design changed quite significantly between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2s, because you change the clamshell front end where the headlights actually come up as part of the bonnet, and they also, more importantly, changed from superchargers to turbocharged power. So this is the only variant with that supercharger on it as well. Currently valued just over £10,000, about £10,700, originally funded at £8,000. This is actually proving to be one of our most successful assets, returning around 34% for investors in around just over a year and a half. Now we come to probably, well, I think almost everybody's favourite car. In fact, I've never heard anybody say a bad word about the Lotus Elise. And this one is a particularly special example. Just 6,500 miles from new. The paintwork is Nautilus blue, but in some lights it's green, some lights it's blue. It's very similar actually to that imperial green colour you saw on the Lotus Carlton. It's absolutely stunning. The Elise has such a special place in loads of people's hearts because as soon as you drive it, you fall in love with it. Just around 725 kilograms with 116 brake horsepower. It's not the most powerful car, but that driving experience is just so pure. The reason we funded this Series 1 Elise is because it never went to the States. So when it hits 25 years old, these cars can be imported to the States as classic cars. And of course, with that big market opening up with lots of demand and a very short supply, these cars hopefully will be in for a fast track for appreciation. So far, we've seen the prices rise by 15.3% since the car was funded in just December last year, and that means we've gone to around a 35k valuation at the moment. It is a fantastic example of one of the most iconic, beautiful British sports cars ever, and we are dead proud to have this one on the Car Crowd platform. And now we come to the whale tail, the iconic Sierra Cosworth 3-door. This car attracts so much attention at every show we go to. It's pretty much the car that everyone comes up and says they've got a story about either owning one or being in one or their dad having one or having one as a poster car. They are such an icon of the 80s and really special in so many people's hearts. And that's kind of reflected in the valuations as well. We've seen some crazy prices for these, with an RS500 example, low mileage one, hitting the heights of 600k at the Race Retro auction a few months ago. Other ones, normal 3-door examples, are still hitting between 80 and 100k fairly regularly for low mileage examples, and therefore this one we're placing conservatively around that 80,000 mark for the director's estimate. This one is very original. The only thing it's had is a stainless steel exhaust and a repaint about 7 or 8 years ago. It is in fantastic, immaculate condition. It has the original spare tyre from 1986 in the boot, never been on the car, as well as completely original interior, There's no cracks or marks on any of the dashboard or the parcel shelf, which you see a lot for those older cars. Plus everything under the bonnet is also fully original. You know, nothing's been tweaked or changed or fettled. So, you know, being one of the most original examples, hitting just around 39,000 miles, having just 2 owners with full history, this car really does represent as one of the best examples out there. So we put the valuation at that 80k mark. We funded the car at £59,000, which means we've got a 30.7% estimated annualised return for investors. It's definitely one of the favourites out there at the shows, and definitely one of the favourites here on the Car Crowd. And now we have the poster car, the Italian Stallion, the Ferrari Testarossa. This car has been featured across so many TV shows and movie shows. It's so popular in iconic culture that everybody pretty much recognises it, petrol head or not. This particular example has covered just 1,600 miles, 1,600 miles, and it's Class C certified as well, meaning it's fully documented with that red book as a fully original Ferrari Testarossa. That's massive in terms of valuation. We also have a pretty much as new condition in terms of paintwork and engine bay and interior. It really is one of the best examples I think you could find worldwide. Plus, being left-hand drive, it's also important that this can be exported to the American market, as we saw with the Lotus Elise, and therefore has that massive audience, that massive demand, and again with very, very small supply. This car was funded at £211,000 and is now valued at just over £220,000, delivering an 11% return for investors. And because this car was funded with our partner Chip last year, it's actually owned by 400 different individuals. So we are so thrilled that this car is performing well for all of those people that joined us from the Chip platform.